In case no one has told you this before, you do not have to do a homeschool curriculum exactly the way it's written. I promise you, there is no homeschool policeman sitting on your shoulder watching to make sure that you did everything on page 43 of your math book exactly the way it said to. Now, I know it can be really tempting, especially if you're first starting out with homeschooling, or if you just feel like, I've already spent a lot of time and money on this program, so I want to make sure that we do everything and get our full value out of it. The problem is that no curriculum can truly be one size fits all. Certainly not for an entire classroom of kids, but even within your own family. If you have multiple children, you will often find that one curriculum might work really well with this kid, but for another child, they have their own unique challenges or different needs than someone else does. So I just want to remind you that this is part of the beauty of homeschooling. You have the opportunity to pick and choose activities or curriculum based on what is going to serve your family best. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Leanne, a homeschool mom of 2 kids and a music educator. In today's video, we're going to talk about 3 different ways that you can adjust any homeschool curriculum you might be using to better fit your family's needs or an individual child's needs. In my experience, these are 3 things that I have found really helpful when it comes to adapting a curriculum. They are omitting activities, adding to the curriculum, or adjusting the curriculum schedule. And as we go through each example, I'm going to be sure to share lots of real-life examples of ways that I have done this in my own homeschool. First, let's talk about omitting or leaving out certain parts of a curriculum. And the example that I want to tell you about is this year we are using Saxon Math for the first time with my 6th grader. I think it's a really good program. I've been really happy with it so far. But having come from a couple other math programs, which are maybe a little bit less intense, Saxon really does feel like a lot of daily work. If we did every single thing that was written in the textbook, we could easily be spending 2 hours on math every single day. And I'm sorry, but we have plenty of other things that we're trying to squeeze into our day. So I'm going to show you an example here. In each individual lesson, there's kind of 4 parts to it. So we have the warm-up, which includes our facts practice, things like practicing multiplication or division facts. We do some mental math and problem solving. We introduce a new concept. Then you get into the practice problems you do with your child. And finally, you assign them the problem set to work on their own. So again, it feels like a lot, especially where we were coming from before. So if I think about a Saxon math lesson and I think about my child and where he's at this point in his education, I kind of went where there has to be something that needs to go, where he can still get a lot of value out of it, but I'm not feeling so overwhelmed by math every day. Here's what I decided to omit from our math program this year. And it was the first activity that I mentioned in the lesson book, and it is the facts practice test. I have not had my child do a single one of these because if you look at it, this is a multiplication example. On this page alone, I think there are 64 problems. I have seen some of them have up to 100 different multiplication facts that they're supposed to do as a timed test. So let me explain my reasoning here, why I'm not having him do the facts practice. I know my kid well, right? I have taught him from the beginning, all the way from kindergarten. And I happen to know that he's pretty strong with his multiplication facts. He's had plenty of practice on it before. So if I felt like that was an area where he was lacking, then obviously I would still include it in his daily work. But given that I really want the focus to be the new concepts that he's learning, and I know that he's already really strong in this area, I don't really feel the need to constantly drill him on things like multiplication facts. Now, it might be different for you and your child. Even my other child, who is not as strong yet with her multiplication facts, if I was using this program with her, then I probably would still include the daily practice. But another reason that I didn't want to use this particular piece of the curriculum is the timed test aspect. My child and myself are both very much alike. Anything that is time sensitive feels like a lot of stress. If I know that that clock is ticking, it is going to make me just freeze up or lose my mind. And I know my child is the same way. So it seems very counterproductive to give him that type of practice test where it's just going to do nothing but cause him extra stress, which we all know when we're stressed, we don't learn. So, do I feel guilty about omitting this certain part of the curriculum? Absolutely not. Am I recommending that no one should do this part of the curriculum? Also no. I'm going to say it again and keep reminding you, all curriculum can and should be adapted to fit your family's or your individual child's needs. The second change that we can make to a homeschool curriculum is choosing to add something to it. And let's talk about a couple different reasons why we might add something. The first would be if we feel like that program we're using might be lacking in a certain area. So I want to show you this book for grammar and writing that we were using in our homeschool last year called Writer's Express. And this is the textbook, but it does also come with a skills workbook for each level. So it's a pretty typical grammar workbook program that they go through daily. And it wasn't terrible. I feel like my kids learned a lot through it, but there were certain concepts, parts of speech that I felt like they were just barely touched on briefly, and then we were moving on to the next thing. So for example, let's say that my kid only had 2 or 3 days during that week practicing adjectives and filling them into sentences. And I felt like, well, maybe they're getting it, but they need a little extra practice with that concept. Then I would go seek out other resources. Teacher Pay Teacher is one of my favorite websites to go to for stuff like this. So I might be looking for like a game on parts of speech or another worksheet that I could supplement with. And again, I continued using that grammar program because I thought it was pretty good overall. But it was just for those certain areas where I felt like they needed a little bit more practice with it that I would choose to add something on my own. Now, let's talk about a more positive aspect of adding to a curriculum. Not because you see something lacking, but because you notice that your child or your children have shown a particular interest in one area. So here's another example from a couple years ago. We had used a lot of the Good and the Beautiful science unit studies, which we love those. We've used several of them and have been very happy with them. I think the first one that we ever did was their marine biology unit. And my daughter, who is an absolute animal fanatic, and in particular, she loves ocean animals, she was so into this unit study. It's like she could not get enough of it. So while I already thought the curriculum itself was really good and contained a lot of good information, I truly wanted to help feed her enthusiasm on this certain subject. So I was seeking out extra resources like books from the library, other educational YouTube videos. Even she did some artwork on her own that was all based on marine animals, and she put it together to make this little art book on her own. But that can just be a really cool way that you can add to a curriculum and supplement certain things. Again, not because you think that it's lacking, but you have ways that you can add to and expand the topic, make it a more well-rounded experience for your kids. Hey guys, I just wanted to pause real quick to remind you that on my website, morningbasketmusic.com, you're going to find all kinds of resources for homeschool families who want to include music as part of their child's education. There's an entire section where you can find some of our free printables. You can also download an entire free week of music as a preview unit and see what you think. Every lesson is done unit study style where you can do it with the whole family, and the best part is, you guessed it, it is very adaptable to fit your family's interests and needs. So please be sure to go check it out, and as always, make sure you're subscribed to Morning Basket Music for more homeschool encouragement and music teaching tips. Okay, the last way that we can adapt a homeschool curriculum to meet our family's needs is by considering how you might adjust the schedule that is prescribed for a certain curriculum. Now, I will say I truly appreciate some of the newer curriculums where the author lays this out for you in the front of the book. I think more and more people are starting to realize that not all homeschool schedules look the same, right? Many families might be involved in a co-op, for example, that happens on one day of the week. So I know a lot of people, even us, we're not currently involved in a homeschool co-op, but a lot of times we just want to have a 4-day school week and, let's say, do something fun on Fridays, like field trips, for example. So I greatly appreciate those authors who are taking the time now to set up a 5-day-a-week schedule and a 4-day-a-week schedule to show you examples of how you can make those adjustments, and it really takes a lot of the guesswork out of it for us. But since unfortunately not every curriculum comes with that type of schedule guide, sometimes it's up to us to sit down with our planning calendar and kind of map everything out and go, what's going to work best for my family and all the different activities that we have going on during the week. I want to show you something that we are using this year, which I bet a lot of people out there are as well, and it is Essentials in Writing, EIW. And both my kids this year have just started this program for the first time, so we're using level 6 and level 4. And I do think it's a good program. I'm very happy with it so far, and I think they are too. But I will tell you a major adjustment that we have made to the schedule with using the EIW curriculum. Thankfully, as I was researching EIW, I read about a lot of people online who had done a similar thing that I was already kind of thinking about in my head. So if you're not familiar with Essentials in Writing, they split it up into 2 distinct units for the school year. All of Unit 1 is considered their grammar work. So again, the daily practice sheets where they're learning about the parts of speech and practicing those things. And then Unit 2 is the writing composition unit, which is really saved for the second half of the school year. So that's where they're starting to practice their paragraphs and longer essays. And honestly, I don't love that type of splitting them apart. I don't know, a lot of other people feel the same way because I've read their reviews and their recommendations online. So it doesn't mean that we're going to scrap the program altogether, but it did take a lot of planning ahead of time on my part. So here's what I chose to do, is to essentially mix up the order of lessons that we're doing. For example, we might spend a month doing, the first 5 or 6 grammar lessons and giving them that kind of practice, but then I will take a pause and we will switch and do one of the writing lessons. So what I like about doing it this way and kind of mixing it back and forth is that after they've spent time learning those grammar concepts, then they can immediately turn around and apply it into their own writing compositions. I feel like this is a really effective way versus waiting until the second half of the year before they're ever expected to write their own paragraph or their own essay. And again, if you research this topic, there are all kinds of people out there who will literally list out the order of lessons that they've chosen to jump back and forth. So again, I know doing this type of schedule adjustment, if it's not already laid out for you, it does take some time investment and oftentimes some creativity on our parts to figure out what's going to work best. But I really have found that it is so worth it. And with all of these things, whether it's omitting or adding to the curriculum or adjusting the schedule, I feel like these things can be so helpful and really go a long way towards personalizing our kids' education. I just want to remind all of us how blessed we are to have this opportunity to do this for our kids and really just meet them where they're at, become students of our children, and know what works best for them. So I hope this video has been super helpful and encouraging to you. If you have done some of these things in your own homeschool, or you have other ideas of ways to adapt a curriculum to meet your family's needs, I would love for you to share your experiences in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, and I'll see you next time.